welcome to this 9th edition of ASTP's EU Forum. My name is Annette Miltoft and I am the VP Europe at the board of ASTP. As you're all very well aware, we live in a time with massive and sometimes unpredictable changes in the geopolitical situation. This has brought both European collaboration and our profession as knowledge transfer professionals into focus and made them more relevant than ever. The Draghi report has outlined the known problem that Europe has great science, but that not enough gets translated into products and services in the market. The report also names research institution and knowledge transfer as essential to the solution. The Competitiveness Compass has shared insight into the many actions that the EU Commission is taking to address these challenges. Today, we'll hear from 3 representatives from the EU Commission, and they will give us an insight into some of those initiatives that the Commission is working on. Just before we start, a couple of practical issues. Today, this morning, we have structured it so that we have the presentations and then a Q&A session. During the presentations, please write your questions in the Q&A section. You use the 3rd button on the far right of your screens, and it's marked Q&A. If you put them in the chat, we might not see them, so please use the Q&A, and we will only be able to answer written questions, so please use the Q&A button. And we do have a break for you at 11 for 15 minutes, so there will be a break in the program there. Other than that, I want us to get straight into to this very exciting program that's been put together for you today. First off, I would like to introduce Bertil Egger-Beck. Bertil is a policy officer with Unit A4, Open Science and Research Infrastructures. And in Unit A4, Bertil is responsible for the role of European Open Science Cloud in the European data ecosystem and the European Research Area Action on an EU copyright and data legislative and regulatory framework fit for research. Moreover, he's overseeing the implementation of the Horizon Europe funded project on facilitating intellectual property management to support open science. Before joining the Commission, Bertil worked as a senior European affairs advisor at the Brussels office of the Confederation of Danish Industry. So Bertil is a fellow Dane and has represented the Confederation of Danish Industry in various international business associations. And he holds a master in political science from the University of Copenhagen. So very, very pleased that you have agreed to introduce us to this, Bertil, and I will hand over to you.
Many thanks for the word, and thanks also a lot for giving me this opportunity to present this important European research area action to the ASTP and to talk directly to experts on the knowledge transfer. I have prepared many slides, and there will be a lot of information, but there will also be good time after my presentation to ask questions, and you will also get the slides afterwards, which I have already shared with the ASTP Secretariat. First, a few words about what is the European Research Area, which from now on we'll just talk about as ERA, and this is also known described on our website in our communication. It was actually started already in 2000 with the ambition to create a single market for research and innovation to strengthen the innovation capacity of the EU and also our competitiveness. And many achievements was done already in the 2000s and the 2010s. Both on the research infrastructures and on the mobility for researchers. But then in 2021, it was decided in the council that it should have a revamp where we should work more strategically on ERA and address some more political actions to move forward the development of the ERA. And it was started with the adoption of the Pact for Research and Innovation in Europe, in 2021, together with also the Council conclusion on the governance of ERA. And subsequently then, the first ERA policy agenda was adopted for 2022 to 2024 with 20 actions. This ERA policy agenda has just been finalized. So now we're moving into the next ERA policy agenda. I will come back to this point in some of my next slides. But then here, as you can see in the second column, there's an overview of what is the governance of ERA. Firstly, there is the ERA Forum, which is established as an expert group on the ERA, where you have representatives from the member states, countries that are associated to the EU through Horizon Europe, and then also the R&I stakeholder groups at the European level. So representing universities, research funders, publishers, and the researchers themselves, and also NGOs working on research and innovation. Then we have the ERA Committee, also known as ERAC, where you have higher ranked government officials from member states who are giving strategic advice and just a bit setting the boundaries for the work of the ERA Forum. And then lastly, you have the council, more precisely the Compet Council, making the final political decisions on ERA actions. And then there's also a quite extensive monitoring framework on ERA, just to see how far we are to achieve the objectives on each of the ERA actions. And there's a regular reporting. So if you just Google ERA platform, then you will get into the website of the ERA platform, where you can get an overview of both the history, the governance, the ERA actions, and also get some statistics on how far we have done it on each of the actions. So I would encourage you to go into the website afterwards to get the full overview. Now zooming into this specific action on an EU copyright and data legislative and regulatory framework fit for research. And just to get the context, I'm here presenting the overarching objectives for the action. Then firstly, and this also applies to the other ERA actions, then if you look into the EU treaty, just on the functioning of the Union, Article 179, you can see there is an obligation for the EU to strive towards achieving a European research area where there's free circulation of both scientific knowledge, researchers, and technology. And for this initiative is most important, this wording on scientific knowledge. So actually directly in the treaty, we have a strong legal basis for this action on copyright and data legislative framework fit for research. Then secondly, we also got some more political backing last year with the much talked about report from Enrico Letta on the single market, because there is a dedicated chapter on the fifth freedom. So a freedom in addition to the four freedoms on goods, services, labor, and capital, then a freedom on research and innovation and education, with the aim just to say that knowledge diffusion should drive societal advancement and also competitiveness and economic development in the EU. And as Enrico Letta, he is saying, it is not a new idea. It was already introduced by the Jacques Delors in the 90s, but he's highlighting it here again because with the revamp of the European research area, there's also a need that we now take some more major steps to ensure that we will actually realize this vision of a fifth freedom. And then the reason why we are focusing on copyright and data legislation is that this is the key legislation setting the framework for, you could say, the conditions for scientific knowledge to circulate, both how you protect scientific knowledge and how you can ensure you can access and share it and reuse it. So that's why it is the focus of this action. And here you have an overview of how the targets were defined in now the former ERA policy agenda, the one for 2022 to 2024. So you can see here is the exact formulation. There was also the headline for my presentation. So propose an EU copyright and data legislative and regulatory framework fit for research. And then you have two expected outcome defined. First, that we should identify barriers and challenges to access and reuse publicly funded R&I results and publication and data for scientific purposes. And then secondly, that we should propose legislative and non-legislative measures to overcome these barriers and to improve the legal framework. So what have we done so far? What was the evaluation here a few months ago when we finalized this agenda? Firstly, we have identified barriers and challenges. I will get back to this point because we have done a major study. And second, we have also identified policy options. So what could be legislative and non-legislative measures, but we have not yet made a proposal. So that's why this action will be continued in the next ERA policy agenda. So it has been a quite extensive process. We needed a lot of evidence and to have thorough consultation with member states, associated countries, and stakeholder groups. And in order to make a proper framework, we need further evidence and also more stakeholder consultations. I will also get back to this point later here in the presentation. And here an overview of the activities we have done so far. Already in 2022, we had some independent expert studies shedding light on this issue. Then we had workshops with stakeholders, so both member states, associated countries, stakeholder groups, and academic experts in the field. Then we started work on the major study on this action in the summer of 2023. And there we organized a major webinar in January 2024 to present the preliminary findings of the study. Then the study itself was published in May 2024. Yeah, so almost a year from now. And if you're interested, you can go to our website and find the study. You have the full title here, Improving Access to and Reuse of R&R Resource Publications and Data for Scientific Purposes. It is a very long study, including the annex. It is of 1,200 pages, but you can also get a quick overview by reading the executive summary. It's only of 22 pages, and there you get an overview of the main findings and also of the policy options. So I would encourage you to do so. Then these findings of the major study were discussed with the Iiro Forum in November 2024. I was in Vienna to talk to the Iiro Forum, and we had a good discussions and got good feedback from member states and stakeholder groups. Member states were very supportive of the findings, and also most of the stakeholder groups. The only stakeholder group being more skeptical was STM Association, representing commercial publishers. So, but I will also get back to this distinction between the different stakeholder groups here later in the presentation. Then now we are preparing an economic study just to see to assess the economic impact of the policy options that have been found in the major study, and we expect this to be launched in the third quarter of this year. But first, here an overview of the next ERA policy agenda, the one for 2025 to 2027. You can already see the Commission's proposal for Council recommendations. I have here in the slide inserted a hyperlink so you can find it directly. It was adopted on the 28th of February, and right now there are negotiations in the Council on the ERA policy agenda. So it's not so much about the actions themselves, because they have been prepared by the ERA Forum where member states are represented. So that's why we expect all these 19 new actions to be adopted. So it's a bit more about the wording on each of the actions and also what should be the exact expected outcome that are up for negotiation. And then we expect the next ERA policy agenda to be adopted on the 23rd of May when there is a Compet Council meeting with focus on research. So that is a date to note, and then afterwards that will be the framework for how we work on the ERA policies. And then in the last policy agenda, this was Action 2. Now we will talk about the new ERA Action 1, which is about enabling open science. It will include the further development of the European Open Science Cloud. As Annette mentioned, that's also an initiative I'm working on. I'm also in the team in our unit on the EASC. And then secondly, it will be about provide researchers with better legal conditions and resources to access and reuse publicly funded research results and use of publication and data for research purposes. So based on the evidence we will collect and the stakeholder consultation, we will decide what would be the best. We will decide on their proposal on how to improve the legal framework for knowledge circulation. Now going into the study, the major study where we have an overview of the barriers, challenges, and also policy options. You can see here a screenshot of the front page. And then, as you can see here, the methodology is firstly a literature review. What have been the findings so far in the area? And then there was done a major survey program targeting 3 stakeholder groups, so researchers themselves, the research performing organizations, and scientific publishers. And then there was also an interview program for these 3 stakeholder groups, as well as experts in the field. And then lastly, there was done a multi-criteria analysis just to see what is the social and economic impact of the policy options that were identified. And then here, an important disclaimer. So when you read the study, it was of course prepared for the European Commission by an external contractor, but it only reflects the views of the authors. And then the good question would, of course, be what is the position of the Commission? What do we believe? So you can say in the Commission, we are dedicated to open science and to open access, and also to fulfill the obligation in the treaty to ensure free circulation of scientific knowledge. But we have not yet decided on what should be the measures to obtain this objective. That would be decided based on the feedback we get from member states, stakeholders, and also the further evidence that we will collect over the next year. Zooming a bit more into the findings, then firstly on the challenges and barriers that have been found. Firstly, what we see with the challenges of the current legal framework is that there are consequences related to the transfer of rights from researchers and their organizations to publishers. So what we see right now, there's initially it is the author, meaning the researcher. They are owning the copyright. Sometimes it can also be the research organization, performing organization owning the copyright. So, and they are free to choose what they want to do with their work. But often they end up using a commercial publisher to publish their work because they own most of the research publishing ecosystem, and also often have the most prestigious journals. And then commercial publishers, that is documented in the study, they often require the researchers to transfer the copyright to the publisher. So then the copyright belongs to the commercial publisher. And there you have the issue that then when it gets, then it will be in a journal that requires a subscription. So it means that if other researchers but then want to access the research findings, they need to pay for the subscription. And it's not always that the university, they have this resource to pay for the necessary subscription. And then secondly, also when you as a researcher want to share your findings, and we also have evidence for this in the study, that most researchers, they believe in open science, they want to share their findings, not only because they believe in the circulation of knowledge, but also because they want to have visibility of their research. They want to be cited in other research projects. But it's not always easy for them to share their work. Because if you have transfer your copyrights to scientific publishers, then they decide on how it can be disseminated. So you cannot necessarily upload it in a university repository. And also, of course, for a publisher, then you have the option to make it available in open access, but then you will need to pay a high article processing charges to ensure it will be available in open access. And many research performing organizations are saying that that is rather expensive. They don't always have the budgets to do so. Then secondly, in the current copyright framework, there are research exceptions to copyright rules, but they are mostly non-mandatory and they are limited in scope. So you can see it in the Information Society Directive, Database Directive, and also the Directive on the Lending and Rental Rights, if you want to see the provisions directly. But that you can see in the study, they have, since they are non-mandatory and limited in scope, they have been implemented differently, and makes it hard for researchers to navigate in and to find out what they can do or what they cannot do. And similarly, it's also difficult for research to find out who controls access to a specific set of data and how they can be used and shared. Then the study also finds that the text and data mining provisions that have been introduced with the directive on copyright in the digital single market, they are giving some new options when you want to collect information for research projects. But there are also some limitations on how it can be used. and there are some disputes for the moment between researchers and rights holders on the extent of text and data mining provisions. And we know that is an issue that our colleagues in DG Connect are dealing with for the moment, together with the Council Working Party on intellectual property rights. And then also through the EU's data and digital legislation, many new data access rights have been introduced for researchers. For example, through Data Governance Act, Data Act, Digital Services Act. But since they are all very targeted and they are specific for each of the EU laws, then it's also a bit difficult for researchers to navigate in these new rights. And here are some statistics from the study. Here you can see an overview of the barriers that are faced by researchers when they try to access and share copyright protected material. So you can see here from my point before, then 80% of the researchers that were surveyed in the study, they say that they cannot access copyright protected material that they needed for their research project because their organization didn't have the necessary subscription. And you can also see some other things that many researchers, they refrain from sharing knowledge resources because they, because they're working with other researchers and they didn't have the subscription, and then also refrained because they were working with partners in the private sector. So there are also some issue when it comes to transnational research cooperation and with the public-private partnerships, and that is also that's also why this action is also relevant for the topic that my colleagues here in RTD will present later in this event on the startups and scale-up strategy and on knowledge valorization. Then moving more into the policy options, there are three categories of policy options presented and discussed in the study. The first one is to have a secondary publication right, which I guess you have heard of before, but that is a legal right to publish a second time. So even though that you have transferred your copyright to a publisher, then you have a legal right to publish it a second time. But since this is an intervention in copyright and in the publishing market, then of course there are some limitations on when you can apply this right. So far, it has been introduced nationally in the 6 member states, so Germany, France, Netherlands, Belgium, and Austria. Bulgaria only introduced secondary publication right while the study was done. So that's why their legislation had not been analyzed in detail, but so far we can say there are 6 member states having it in place. And then you can see here the policy options on secondary publication rights. They can also be considered as a parameter for how to design a secondary publication right. So the first is just what is the scientific output that should be included? Should it only be research articles? Should it also be books, for example? Then what should be the threshold of public funding? Should it be 50%? Should it be higher? Should it be lower? Then what is the version to be included? Could it be the author accepted version, earlier version, or could it be the version of records, so the very final version of a publication? What is the embargo period? And then also the confinement to specific form of use. Should it be a non-commercial use requirement, or should you also be able to use it for some commercial purposes? And then there is an alternative option on umbrella licensing. It is not a popular option for neither publishers nor research performing organizations. So that is not something for our considerations henceforth. But here in the study, they recommend a quite extensive regulation, so allowing a quite broad range of output to be included in a secondary publication right. That's the recommendation by the authors behind the study. And then here an overview of the stakeholder views on secondary publication rights. So you can see when you ask research performing organizations, they are overwhelmingly supporting an EU-wide secondary publication right. When it comes to publishers, they are more divided. Commercial publishers acting on a pure market basis and on a for-profit basis are against, because they are afraid of losing revenues, and they consider it as a threat to the business model. When you ask institutional publishers, they are mainly supporting, And an institutional publisher, just to explain, they are a publisher connected to a research performing organization to promote the work of the institution. Then you have non-commercial publishers that are split, and a non-commercial publisher here is defined as a publisher that is financed through memberships and donation to publish for a specific academic community. They go into the second category of policy options, that is copyright and related rights. Here we are talking about how the rules are designed currently at the EU level. So the research exception to copyright rules that I talked about before. Here the policy options that are explored in the study are firstly to strengthen the research exception, so ensure that they will be harmonized and it will also be broader, because currently the research exception is only covering illustration for teaching and research purposes. So it's quite narrow. You could also include other research purposes for such as data collection and training of AI models and so forth. Then secondly, they recommend to relax or even abandon the non-commercial use requirement. So it will be easier so that, for example, researchers, they can better engage in industry academia collaboration and use copyright protected material that they have collected through the research exception for this industry academia collaboration. So that is what is discussed on the motivation for relaxing and abandoning the non-commercial use requirement. Then there's also about the text and data mining provisions of the copyright in the Digital Single Market Directive, which I also mentioned before, on barriers and challenges, where they are still on the way it is designed currently. Then the authors find it might be necessary to amend the provisions, or if not, then provide some more recommendations. And then we again have this alternative option on umbrella licensing, which has not been that popular among stakeholders. So that is something we are skipping here for the discussion. Here you also have some data from the study. So here I will not go in detail with all of them, but here you have some statements on how the strengthening of the research exception could be done. And then you see the views of research performing organizations. They are overwhelmingly supportive, like they were for EU-wide secondary publication rights. When it comes to publishers, they are divided, because here you have data for all of the scientific publishers. But when you look more into the data, you can see that in the annex, then you find the same pattern as before, that institutional publishers, they are supportive, non-commercial publishers are split, and commercial publishers are against. So it's the same pattern as we saw for the EU-wide secondary publication right. Then lastly, we have policy options on data and digital legislation. And what has been analyzed in the study is the Open Data Directive, Data Governance Act, Data Act, Digital Services Act, Digital Markets Act, AI Act, and also the European Open Science Cloud. So as I mentioned before, then researchers, they recognize that more legal options have been provided to access data for research projects, but they also find it hard to navigate in the new legal landscape. So that's why then the study is mainly discussing options for non-legislative measures. And that is also something we will follow in the Commission, just to see how we, through guidance, best practices, technical support, can ensure that researchers, they will better use these new possibilities, especially Article 40 of the Digital Services Act, where vetted researchers, they will get access to data from the large platform and search engines to do research on societal risks to the EU. There's a delegated act on the way that will specify how you get access to these data. But there are also some legislative options being discussed in the study, just including to streamline the terminology related to scientific research, and also to evaluate if there could be a horizontal set of data access rights, so going across the different EU laws on data and digital legislation. Again, when you look at the stakeholder views, you can see that it is made that the research performing organizations, they see a great benefit in the data access right on the data and digital legislation. But when it comes to the publishers, they don't really see the benefit. But then, and here you also see a bit more, you see the same pattern as before for the options on secondary publication right and on copyright and related rights. And then the evaluation in the study on the policy options related to secondary publication rights and copyright and related rights. So it finds that by applying the policy options and the way it is proposed by the authors, then there will be a positive social impact or scientific impact, because it will be easier and more simple for researchers to access and reuse research results, and it will make the research process more efficient and productive. They will have better collaboration opportunities because they can better share copyright protected material with researchers in other member states and with private partners. And then also in general, it will have a positive impact on advancing research and innovation and the ambitions to reach the fifth freedom of the single market. The economic impact is more mixed. Research performing organizations are likely to save resources because they will not need to spend so much on subscriptions and article processing charges. They can then hire more researchers and spend more money on research projects. Then, while certain publishers, especially the commercial ones, are likely to lose revenue, so there will be a strong pressure for them to adapt their business model. And that's also why a more comprehensive economic impact analysis has been recommended. And that was also specifically asked for by the Eero Forum when we had the discussion back in November, that we need more evidence on the economic impact. And that's why we have launched a call for tenders on a study, and we expect the study to be launched in the Q3 of 2025, where we see what would be the economic impact on research performing organizations, scientific publishers, the EU economy as a whole, and our competitiveness towards other non-EU G7 countries if we impose this legislation. Here we will focus on secondary publication right and copyright and related rights, because these are the areas where we see the biggest potential for legislative measures. When it comes to data and digital legislation, is mainly about non-legislative measures, and then not so relevant here for the economic study. Then lastly, just a few words on what could be a framework for a proposal. It has, just to say, it has not yet been decided if there should be a proposal on this. It is still under consideration, and we need to find out. We need to hear more from stakeholders and from member states, and have more evidence. So the evidence we will get through the economic study before a final decision is taken. But what we know so far, if you read the mission letter from our Commissioner for Startups, Research and Innovation, you can see that she has a task to propose an ERA Act. You can also see the ERA Act mentioned in the competitiveness compass for the EU, and it is scheduled for Q3 of 2026. So that is our timeline. We also just had a targeted discussion on the ERA Act with the Eero Forum, so they are fully informed of the plans towards an ERA Act. Then soon there will be launched a call for evidence and a public consultation on the ERA Act as a whole, where you will also have the opportunity to have your say on the objectives for the ERA Act and what should be included. Then there will be an impact assessment for the ERA Act as a whole, where our major study and also economic study will feed in if our action is included in the ERA Act. And just to say, the ERA Act will not include all ERA policy actions. It will only include the actions that require legislative measures. So the actions that can be fulfilled through cooperation and other kinds of non-legislative measures will not be included in ERA Act. And also the final decision what to include in the ERA Act is not only about our initiative, but also for the other potential initiative. That's also about the evidence and the views from member states and stakeholders. So that was it. A lot of information, and I'll be happy to take questions.
Thank you so much, Bertil. I will be very impolite and ask and start off with a question or a comment maybe. I definitely think that I recognize that scientists find it difficult to navigate, and you've certainly shown us the complexity of the legislation that they need to comply with. I think one of the economic impacts that that also need to be taken into account perhaps is the transactional costs for research institutions and academics. to collaborate with each other and to collaborate with companies is that when they have to comply with all these different policies and all the legislation that is there for a purpose and good purposes, like data protection on personal data, it increases the transactional costs. They need to spend time on this. They need to work it out. They need to describe it. They need to understand it, and they need to either they need to understand it and they find it difficult, or the support systems at the research institutions need to be bigger. There has to be more people advising them on this. And I think in addition to the subscriptions, that is a cost to the research institutions. And I think if you did a survey on that, you would find that almost every research institution across Europe has increased its support staff due to this. So is that something that you're taking into consideration as well?
Yes, no doubt. Thank you for bringing this up, because it is indeed very relevant. I think I will just go back to the slide on the economic analysis, because that is exactly something we will investigate in the economic analysis, because then we need to take into account the total cost. Of course, it will not only be about subscription cost and article processing charges. It will be also about the whole resources that are spent by research performing organizations, also to ensure that they comply with legislation. And we are fully aware that at universities there's legal advisors, administrative staff, just to ensure that researchers they can comply with copyright obligations, and also to ensure that they don't risk copyright infringements. And we have also seen it has become even more complicated in recent years due to the new AI techniques for research. And that's also what is making this action more urgent, at least from our assessment. Because when you do training of AI models, you need a collection of large data sets, and you need it from different sources. So that's also why, as a researcher, you need more legal clarity on what you can do when you collect data for your AI models. So we have the text and data mining exceptions, but there's still some doubt or how they can be interpreted. And as I mentioned, there have been some legal disputes in member states between researchers and rights holders. So that is one track, and that is dealt with in the council. But then, as we see it, we can also give better conditions through harmonizing and strengthening the research exception. So that is also one tool. And then also when it comes to transaction costs, we're also aware of when you change a bit the publishing ecosystem, which would happen if we introduced an EU-wide secondary publication right, then you would also need to build up some larger and stronger university repositories. So in that regard, there will also be some transaction for the research sector and a need for some upfront investments to carry out this transformation, and then with some more long-term benefits. So all these costs are something that that should be taken into account in this economic analysis, and that's also why we need this further evidence. So we will have a more sound discussions on what would be the right legislative measures.
Thank you. We have a question from Mareike Goetz. With the actions taken to promote open science, does this affect the possibility to license out copyright authorship protected IP like software?
On this well, we are not going to the plan is not to regulate the licensing options. And it's also not clear now when you mention software that we will directly have an intervention in the software directive. It is something for discussion, at least. But then if you look at when you look at the way the research exception is currently formulated in the Information Society Directive, then you can see it applies to all copyright protected material. So then including software. But then currently you can only use it for illustration, for teaching and research purposes. So it is quite narrow. But then if a harmonized and strengthened research exception is adopted, then it would imply that, of course, you could collect information also from from software and then use it for a wider range of research purposes. So I hope that was an answer. But otherwise,
Thank
please
you.
let me know.
Yeah. And there's a question. Yes. In terms of making new research outcomes more accessible, shouldn't the impact of this new research to be taken into account? If new research involves a significant breakthrough, shouldn't it be made sure that it's distributed for the common good?
Yes, that's exactly what we are aiming for. That is, it should be widely distributed. That it should be accessible to more researchers across Europe. So that's why we are looking at how you can ensure that the legal framework becomes more simple, more flexible, so that it becomes easier to access the latest knowledge, and also so that researchers, they can better share their research results, so their groundbreaking findings. Because that's exactly what research is about, that you should build on the findings of other researchers. But what we see today is that there are too many technical and legal barriers preventing researchers from sharing their results, even though they want to. As I mentioned in the presentation, we have documentation that the vast majority of researchers, they want to share the results, but they see some major barriers to do so, and that's why they often end up not doing it.
Thank you. And then we have a very interesting question here from David. Has it been assessed to what extent ERA is susceptible to free riding by other nations that do not reciprocate? Is this a potential danger to the competitiveness of the EU?
It's a good question.
It's a very good question,
That's also you can say that's a bit a broader debate about the open science objective in general. So it's true when you share an article on data set in open access, yes, it's free to everyone, and then also people, researchers outside the EU, they can also access and reuse the information. But as a researcher, then you also want at least for most research, want your research resource to be widely used and also widely recognized and cited. So that's also a part of the project. If we talk it a bit broader, not only about this action, but for example, also on the European Open Science Cloud that I'm working on, then obviously there are some areas where you have very sensitive data. So it could be something where you have personal data. It could also be an area of strategic importance to the EU, for example, defense and security. And there, what we're doing in the European Open Science Cloud, which is supposed to be an ecosystem for research data and scientific resources, is that there we will build up some safe communities or safe forums where researchers, they can share sensitive data, and where you will make it open to researchers in other EU member states and also in associated countries, but you will not make it open to a global audience. And thereby you will also make sure that it cannot be used by competitors from, for example, China or Russia. So there is a distinction on what can be completely open and what should be open in a certain forum.
Thank you. And I think we have just one final question from Mareike. A more general question, just for my understanding, how do you define and identify the relevant stakeholders in this field? Is it just research institutions and publishers?
It depends a bit on how you approach it. When it comes to ERA governance, then you can also see that on the ERA platform, the website with all the monitoring. There you can see the criteria to be a stakeholder in the ERA forum is that you are a European RNI stakeholder group. So in the ERA forum, we don't have national stakeholders, because here we need to address the European level. Then as a national stakeholder, you will need to go to your European umbrella organization to have your issue raised at the EU level. And then there are also some different stakeholder groups defined. So as I mentioned, is for researchers, for research performing organizations, research funding organizations, and scientific publishers, and then NGOs working on the research and innovation. For example, NGOs working on the public domain. They are represented in the ERA forum, and thereby directly influencing the decisions on ERA action. When it comes to the specific initiative and also what is outside the Eero Forum, well, we're always open to dialogue and to stakeholder groups who want to raise their opinion on this action. But what we have seen so far is obviously the stakeholders working within research and innovation who have an interest in this action and who have approached us. So that's just, we of course open to dialogue and to all stakeholders who believe this is relevant for their field.
Thank you, Bertil. I think the last question that I see is as much a comment, and I think it's a way to engage as well is with the IP4OS project that ASTP is a partner in. And I think it's such an exciting topic. This is the balance between the openness and the sharing within our community and performing and creating impactful research, and at the same time balancing research security, which is another hot topic at the moment. So it'll be exciting to see how this all plays out, and we'll be sure to make available all of the knowledge and the experiences and the hands-on knowledge that the membership base of ASTP has within this field, and be very happy to interact more on this topic. Thank you so much, Bertil, for sharing this with us. Very exciting initiatives, exciting times that we live in. So thank you very much.
Welcome.
And I will hand over to Smilka Vikic-Stubic, who will introduce our next speaker.
Hi, thank you, Anette. Good morning, everyone, and I'm really happy to be here for the 9th edition of EU Forum and moderate the session where Mr. Eerola, I hope I pronounced your name correctly, we didn't have a chance to ask. So, who will tell us a little bit about latest developments of knowledge valorization policies. And as ASTP, we are always in a close collaboration with DG Research and Innovation, especially with the unit for valorization policies and IPR within the Prosperity Directorate. So we are following whatever you do because it's really big interest of ASTP community. So Dr. Eerola is a policy officer in the unit for valorization policies and IPR in DG Research and Innovation of the European Commission. And he has been working for the Commission since 2004 in various positions in the area of health research, personalized medicine, rare diseases, and knowledge valorization policy. And Mr. Eerola is an MD and PhD by training and holds an MBA. Congratulations to all of these titles. And before joining the Commission, he worked in the Academy of Finland, in the Christian de Dive Institute of Cellular Pathology and the Université Catholique de Leuven, and as well as the University of Turku in Finland. And he will tell us a little bit more today about the new developments in the European knowledge valorization policy and the next ERA policy agenda, which is now a hot topic to be adopted. So please, Dr. Eerola, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Smilka, and good morning to everybody. I hope you can hear me. Okay, so thank you very much for the invitation. It's a great pleasure for me to talk in this ASTP-EU Forum.